So my name is Laura Maudsley. I work as the director of the TVR Institute at Northwest Indian College, which is in Northwest Washington State. And the Institute is now part of AIVRTTAC. We're a partner with AIVRTTAC at Northern Arizona University. And Rebecca, want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, whichever time zone you're in. I'm Rebecca Holland, and I work right now as a vocational rehabilitation coordinator for AIVRTTAC, which is the Technical Assistance and Training Center for tribal VR programs across the nation. Both Laura and I have background as directors in tribal voc rehab, and I have also worked for the Veterans Administration and the state VR program. So I'm thrilled to be here and happy that you joined us.
So this webinar is about team building. And team building is kind of a best practice, something to kind of aim towards, because having a strong team that works efficiently and effectively can really take the pressure off of, say, the director as an individual having to fulfill all the goals and activities of the grant. But if the entire staff works together as a team, then you can all work together towards those goals. And then that also frees up time to be creative and innovative and come up with some strategies that maybe you hadn't, the director or even individual staff might not have thought of individually. So this conversation about team building is not meant to overwhelm you or make you feel like, oh, I should have been doing this 3 years ago, but just to give you some ideas and tools for how you can create a team in your staff. So the learning outcomes for today are describing the different components of team building, identifying the qualities of a successful and effective team building, and identifying culturally appropriate team building activities. So this is kind of the outline that we're going to use today as we go through our topics. What is team building? Why is team building important? Types of team building and culturally appropriate team building. And we also have just a brief poll for you. If you could please respond, how often does your project to do some sort of team building? I'll give you a couple minutes. Okay, thank you. It looks like there's quite a spread in how often different programs do their team building. So thank you so much for responding to that. Rebecca, did you want to comment about this at all?
No, I think there was quite a variety. So again, thank you for providing those responses.
Slide, please. So we kind of wanted to start off with a discussion about what team building means to you. When you hear the word team building, what do you think of? Personally, I always think of that trust exercise where they have your staff stand behind you and you fall backwards and they're supposed to catch you for some reason. That's what always comes to mind for me. But I think that they don't always catch you. So probably not a great example, but that's what comes up for me. So if any of you have want to talk about have any ideas, and put in the chat, or you can unmute and tell us about what that might mean for you. Don't be shy.
Good morning. Hey, this is Shelley for Bob later. And
Hey, Shelley.
for me, team building, well, the first thing I hear when I hear team building is teamwork. And building your team, I guess, for however you choose to build your team to make it stronger and better. Like for our VR team here, what can we do? We like get together and what can we do that makes our team greater to help our people?
Thanks, Shelley. Jeremy in the chat box said, I think team building can be anything like even a simple brainstorming session. And Sheila said, I think of getting together to talk about what is going on in the office and come together for solutions if one of us has an issue that we cannot figure out on something. Sorry. And always eat together. Yes, important. Figure out on our own, she meant, yes. And Carmela says, for me, I feel it is anything that brings the team together, even just celebrating one another. It's really important. Okay, thank you all for your feedback. I'm going to say one more thing. Tammy says, here at NIVRP, we get together once per month for staff meetings. Once per year, we get together for team building and review of our program. We usually do something related to team building. We eat together and usually do a project. It is usually at the holidays, so it is holiday related. Thanks, Tammy.
So this is Rebecca, and thank you for sharing that, Laura. I like the way that you introduced the topic. I'm going to talk in just a minute about what is team building, but one of the things I really enjoyed about those of you that commented is that you're looking at team building in all different perspectives. So you're not thinking of it as we step away for a week in the wilderness, and like Laura said, we fall into each other's arms as trust exercises. You're really looking at it from the perspective of how are we building unity? And that is really important when it comes to team building. I really like to think of team building as a piece of a foundation. So let's talk for a minute about building a house. When you build a house, the very first thing you want to put in place is your foundation. And if your foundation isn't firm and established, then the house doesn't stand or even last the way that it should. So when we think about team building, it's a piece of your foundation. So it's not the only part, but it is a piece that adds to your project. It adds to your program, to what you're doing in your communities, because it pulls together your team. I also want to talk for just a minute about the difference between team building and teamwork. They aren't the same thing. You can have one without the other. So you can do a lot of team building activities and never create teamwork, because sometimes in team building, people aren't honest the way that they need to be. You can also do a lot of teamwork without incorporating team building. So they're different, and the way they play out is different. And both really are a process. And today we're going to focus on team building. So let's talk for just a couple minutes about what is team building. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Ava. Actually, I think what we want to do, Ava, before we talk about this, so go back a slide, is I think we want to do a quick poll and have you all just respond with a yes or no or maybe to this poll. So if you could put up that pre-assessment poll, Ava. So this poll says, do you know what team building is and why it is important? So please respond. We'll give you a couple minutes to do this. So it looks like most of you have responded. There's just a couple, and it may be because you're not actually on your computer or calling in that you can't respond. But it looks like nobody said no, which is really powerful. And most of you said yes, and some of you said somewhat. So as we continue, we want to talk specifically about what is team building and why is it important. So next slide, please. So what is team building? First of all, it's an ongoing process that helps a group grow into an interconnected unit. Later in our presentation, Laura's going to talk about, is team building really complicated? And as some of you already shared, it isn't. It can be something as simple as sitting down and sharing a meal together. And we know in Native communities in particular, that's extremely important. And think about all the things that you learn about each other when you have that meal together, when you're just sitting and interacting as a unit. We also know that team building is when team members not only share expectations for maybe accomplishing tasks, but they learn about trust. Not the kind where you fall into each other's arms and blindly do that, but the kind where you learn, can I trust? Can people trust me? Because it goes both directions. And also it's where we can learn support for one another, not just in the jobs that we're doing, because it's not just our jobs that happen in our workplaces. There's also personal things going on for each of us. So how are we supporting each other in our work roles and in our roles outside of work? And then finally, team building is respect for each other's individual differences. How do we respect people we don't always agree with or understand? And how do we make sure we're a person that can be respected by others? So team building is made up of a lot of different components. Laura, is there anything you want to add to that?
I just also want to say that, team building can be formal things that you actually set up, formal activities, or actually time spent away from the office where you're actually doing activities that are planned, or there also can just be a staff meeting or case staffing, or resource sharing during a staff meeting. So there's really a whole spectrum of activities that can fall under team building. Janine says that you are cutting out. Is anyone else noticing that at all?
It can be various different internet connections, so hopefully that will resolve for Denise. I really liked in the chat where, let me see who said it. It was Sheila who said, team, together everyone achieves more. And that's a very powerful acronym. So thank you for sharing that. So we want to ask another question, and we'd really like there to be discussion. So feel free to unmute yourself and talk through this. But Ava, go ahead and advance to the discussion question. that question is, have you done team building as a staff? And if so, and we saw that many of you do, why was it important for you to do that team building? And so unmute and just share your responses if you can, or you can put your responses in the chat.
Hi, this is Tammy Cooper Woodrich from North Intertribal Voc Rehab. I think the most important thing for getting together for team building is that we realize that each of us are just as human as one another, and that we have daily trials and tribulations that go along with our work, and that we can build a relationship to trust one another for advice and for solutions to some of the things that happen along the way in our job.
Very powerfully said, Tammy. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else want to share why team building is important?
This is Janine. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I know that for us, we just hired Jacqueline, how long ago? September. So she's new to the program for us, and it's important to learn each other's working styles and to welcome her and include her in everything that's going on so that she's not feeling lost and overwhelmed. And then also, you know, we are learning the best ways to work with her, and she's learning how to work with us.
That was a great example, Janine. Thank you for sharing that. So when you do have new staff on board, it's difficult to get to know each other if there isn't some type of team building going on. Carmela, I'll get to you in just a moment. But I think what's important is to remember that team building isn't just the big events. It's also sitting down and sharing a meal together, going for a walk in the community together. It's something that just provides that atmosphere for connection. So thank you, Janine. Carmela, you want to share?
I think one of the things that it does when it's something that you're like maybe doing activities where you're laughing and you're participating together, but it also gives people an opportunity to take risks. And if you can take risks together and laugh together, then sometimes when you're working together, you're able to take those risks and trying something new, or even like that, asking somebody for help.
So Carmela, what do you learn from taking a risk?
Well, I guess it's kind of with anything, you can apply it anywhere. Taking a risk when you're asking for something from your supervisor or asking advice from somebody else. And then even going in a different direction with the consumers. Sometimes it's, you might be afraid to ask somebody for, you know, they'd be willing to, you know, have your consumer do work adjustment there. But if you're willing to take that risk, you know, you take the risk. I mean, I always tell people all they can do is say no. And so, you know, you can take it. What if they say yes? Then you have that opportunity there.
Well said. So a risk builds our confidence and gives us courage. Thank you for sharing that. I noticed in the chat that Rachel said, sometimes it really helps to clear up misunderstandings that may occur through email or phone discussions, especially if there are multiple office sites for a program. Getting to know different styles of communication are key. Very good and excellent, because sometimes that face-to-face interaction can be difficult. So an email can break the ice and even set up a face-to-face interaction when it comes to clearing those things up. Anyone else want to share regarding this question?
Just want to say, related to Rachel's comment, you know, not being in the same office has its own unique challenges when it comes to this, because you're not together every day. And so I think it is really important, you know, like Tammy talked about and Rachel's mentioning here, that when you do have different office sites, that the team building can be really important, because there can be misunderstandings that can go on for a long time if you're not, well, they can go on a long time when you're in the same office, but it can, it's definitely something that needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Laura. You know, I was thinking during COVID that for a lot of different programs and projects, Zoom interaction was all that could be done because people weren't in their offices. And if you were really remote, you couldn't even do Zoom interaction. You might be able to get a phone call in. So we had to learn how to do team building in a different way. And that really required thinking outside the box and thinking of ways of how do we pull everyone together when we're not in that same work site. So thank you both to Rachel and Laura for sharing that. Laura, you want to go on from here?
Or Ava, could you go to the next slide, please? So why is team building important? So team building helps you create a strong team through forming bonds and connections among your staff. And creating, which is, you know, very beneficial to organizations and programs. Team building can build trust, soften conflict, encourage communication, and increase the collaboration. Team building can involve the identification of team members' strengths and preferences. When you know the strengths of the people on the staff, it can often be easier, not necessarily easier, but more efficient to assign things to people based on their strengths. And then that helps the efficiency of the program. So those are you can use those types of strategies for task completion. And also, you know, preferences of people, or even things that people want to learn, you can assign them those activities that would help them develop skills that they wish to have. Team building enables your team to share ideas and responsibilities, which helps reduce stress for everyone, allowing them to be detailed and thorough when completing tasks. This enables the project to meet grant goals and objectives more consistently. Team building saves time and provides everyone with more energy to focus on getting their job done. I really like what Carmela said about risk taking, because when you work as a team and the team takes a risk, it's not just one person who's kind of putting their self on the line, but it's everyone that's on the team. And then you have, if it doesn't go well, perhaps, or it goes well, you can still work as a team to decide how to move forward from there. By encouraging employees to work as a team, the project can improve the productivity levels of everyone. Just like Sheila said, together everyone achieves more. The project can come up with innovative ideas with more efficiency, making the benefits of teamwork clear. In addition, working as a team fosters empathy and caring for each other and makes the work environment healthier. Next slide, please, Ava. So these are some reasons why team building works. Team building can create efficient work. So by dividing tasks by the people whose interests or preference or strengths lie in those areas, then tasks can be accomplished more smoothly. Team building gives staff an opportunity to self-monitor what is going well for them, what is not going well for them, and then sharing that back with the group, and then problem solving from there if need be. Team building can give staff support to think outside the box, try new innovative ideas. Team building creates an environment where staff can learn from each other. Staff members can share what worked well, what didn't work well. And it gives people an opportunity to follow up on new ideas or new resources. Team building promotes strong working relationships where People can learn how to trust each other and then also be there for each other, and to know that someone's going to be there for you when you need it as well. Building creates empathy and compassion for one another. And team building is actually a really great opportunity for the incorporation of culture into the program activities, and the way that the staff relates with each other.
So before we go on to the 6 C's of teamwork, one of the things that I wanted to say about the whys and the reasons and the importance of teamwork is that if you can create a safe space, and we all know what a safe space feels like, and sometimes a staff doesn't feel safe. So one of the real, thinking about teamwork, one of the reasons why it can work is to create that safe space. And I know that with my staff, when I was director at the Pueblo of Jemez, we had something that was like a talking stick. And if you had that talking stick, you could communicate without others interrupting you. And then we just talked about, when it was your turn, not going back and doing the what ifs or yeah buts that person may have shared. So if somebody shared really deeply about something and you didn't agree with that, one of the things that was important is not to go back and say why you don't agree with it, because everybody's experience is everybody's experience. And we don't live inside of each other's bodies to know why we feel that way. So in creating that safe space and really making sure everyone has a voice, it can really set up why team building can work. And that leads us to the next slide, which really talks about the 6 C's of team building. And these C's really are improving, their ways to improve how we view each of these things and how they can significantly change our teams. So the first one is communication. When I'm communicating, I think people should understand everything I'm saying because I'm being really clear. Well, I know what I'm trying to say in my head, but that doesn't mean that other people are tracking with me. So when we make sure we're working on and viewing communication and team building, we're thinking about how we're communicating with others. And remember that communication isn't just the words you say, it's also your body language and your nonverbal cues. And there's times when I've sent a lot of messages without ever saying a word. So in team building, really paying attention to communication. The second one is caring. How do I like to be cared for? And how do others on my team want to be cared for? And am I making an effort to do that? Or do I just want my view and my needs met without looking at how I'm caring for other people on the team? And let's face it, a lot of times we're all going through stuff outside of the office that impacts our work. So how am I providing empathy towards what some on staff might be going through? The third C is commitment. And I don't know about any of you, but I know for myself, my commitment hasn't always been there in terms of a team. I've kind of sat back and watched, well, how's this all going to play out before I commit? And you can't have real good teamwork. You can't create a lot of team building if you're not committed to that process and committed to the people you're working with. And so it really takes looking at what is my commitment and what is the commitment of the others on the team. The fourth C is confidence. Team building can create an atmosphere of building confidence. Especially with some of the things that all of you have said, it's like, how do I take that risk and talk about what I need to? Or how do I approach that conflict in a way that builds my confidence? When we build our confidence as a unit, we provide better services. We know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and we know the end purpose, that the people that we're serving will have positive outcomes. The fifth C is cooperation. I like to think of this like, you know, I used to say to a past supervisor that I had, yes, ma'am, I'll do what you asked me to do. I'll cooperate. But I was standing up on the inside and sitting down on the outside, which basically meant on the inside, I had no desire to cooperate. But on the outside, I was sending the message that I was going to. Cooperation is where we bring those two things together. We recognize that when we cooperate in a group, when we hear each other, when we consider what each other is experiencing, then that cooperation comes together to be authentic. It isn't fake, or it isn't a mask that we put on. And finally, and Laura, you know, alluded to this in her last slide, culture is significant when it comes to team building. Everyone brings to the table their own beliefs, their values, what matters to them, and understanding each other's culture. You know, how involved are you in the community? How involved are you in Native activities? How involved are you in spiritual things? Getting that understanding and knowing how your team can flow out of that place of culture is really important. And so as you move forward in this presentation, or even in the team building that you're doing, be thinking about these 6 C's and how your view of them really can significantly change the team that you're on. Laura, is there anything you want to add to that?
Oh, I think that you covered it. Thank you.
All right. So we're going to move on into a discussion question in just a minute. But before we do that, can you put up that pre-test or that post-test for us? Not test, assessment. I'm sorry, it's not a test. But again, we want to know, we're gathering some data. We want to know, was it helpful to hear this? So, you know, did the material presented help you understand what team building is and why it's important? So we'll give you a minute to respond. So thank you for responding to that question. It's very helpful for us to know as we move forward, just making sure that the material we're presenting is really providing you with what we hope that it is, so we can end the poll, Ava. So the next discussion question that we want to have has to do with the benefit from team building. So I want you to think about the team building your program has done. And again, it's not just the big things, it's also the small or things that you don't even see as team building, sharing a meal, going for a walk, having a discussion at a staff meeting. And I want you to, let's discuss for a few minutes what you feel is a benefit you've personally received. How has it helped you?
Keith says it helped with creating a shared vision. And Rachel has said a stress reducer on multiple levels. Thank you, Keith and Rachel.
So Rachel, would you mind, if you can, unmuting and talking just a little bit about that? I think that's a huge benefit. So could you share that just a little bit? So we'll come back to Rachel if she can unmute. Laura, do you want to read other
Sure,
comments?
sure. Sheila said, "It let me realize that other people do not know what I know, and I don't know what they know how to do."
Nicely said.
Yes,
That's
yes.
good.
And Tammy, how each of our experiences can benefit our program goals and how we can use one another as a resource.
So in other words, everybody who comes to the table has different skills, abilities, strengths that they can bring to the team. So thank you for sharing that, Tammy. Rachel says her phone won't unmute. So Rachel, if you want to put a few things in the chat, you can, and we'll read that. If you push *6 also, maybe that might actually unmute your phone. Anybody else want to unmute and share? Remember, there's no right or wrong in this. This is your benefit you've seen for yourself.
This is Rachel. I had to leave the meeting and change my settings and come back, but now I'm unmuted.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So in terms of stress reducer, one of the ways is, like we talked about a few moments ago, getting together and laughing, you know, sharing experiences together, and just being able to also sometimes have that colleague that you can vent with, because we can't take our work home with us. We can't share our stressors about work at any other location. So having somebody that we can maybe discuss a case and talk about concerns about certain participants or their case or their situation, maybe even beyond just the VR portion, just so we're not holding that in. And that's a form of self-care for ourselves as well.
Thank
So
you.
that's a stress reducer.
Thank you. I sometimes think we underestimate the wonderful benefits of laughing, you know, and in team building, if there isn't laughter of some kind, we're way too serious. And then also just having the air, because, you know, the work that we do is very difficult. It's rewarding and it's wonderful, and it is something positive and uplifting, but it does have its times when it's very stressful. So thank you for explaining that a bit more, Rachel.
Angie says, everyone works through the process, everyone is equal and has a voice, and everyone is respected, and vice versa.
Absolutely, in a perfect environment. We all know, though, we've worked in places where that wasn't the case. And so this is what we're striving for. So thank you, Angie, for sharing that. Anything else before we move on?
I just want to say that, you know, a lot of times the benefits are not like the work related, but it's more about learning more about what's going on with your coworkers in their life, what they might be going through at this time. And I think that also gives you just kind of a motivator to support each other when, you know, you find out if someone has a sick parent or someone that they're caring for outside of work. And, you know, I think, you know, that it gives you an opportunity to just maybe step it up for them, or at least ask how they're doing often, you know, and just be there for them.
Or ways you can help.
Yes.
You know, sometimes the best question to each other is, how can I help? And that help can be simple to something where it has more depth to it. Janine, is there something you wanted to share?
This is Susie, part of the Janine app.
Oh,
Hi,
okay.
everybody. I think that the huge benefit is having that time to know your team, understanding, as you were saying, what they do. There are times, because all of us do this work, we know that some people are so difficult, and we just need to let that go, and the team is there for you to do that. It's not only just our personal pieces, it's also those that we work with. There are days that we have a lot of challenges, and we just come into my office, we have a little table, we pull out the beads and we take a mental health moment. It could be a couple hours, and we will build necklaces, or we'll just sort things for a workshop. And it gives us time to really talk about what's going on and how we can better support each other as well as the people that we work with. And you all know that we can't, when there's a great success from someone we're working with, we can't run to the street and say, my gosh, so-and-so just got a job and blah, 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 blah. You know, those things we have to celebrate quietly because of the guidelines that we fall under. So I think that having a successful team and being benefited by it is really taking that moment to know each other deeply. Because the work we do is very, very much on everyone's heart and mind. And try to leave it at the door when you go home. And I know there's days that we all go home and in the middle of the night we think, oh my gosh, we could do this. Let's see how this works. And your team is where you bounce those ideas off.
That was great. That was so well said. And I absolutely loved your example of the beading activity. You know, just taking a moment of getting your mind off of the intensity of the work that we do and being able to have that mental health break. So thank you for sharing that. You know, one more thing that I think is a key benefit, and we've all kind of alluded to it a little bit, but I'm going to be more specific. And that is you learn about yourself. You learn the things you want to work on. You learn the things that, you know, might be jumping out that you don't want there. You learn so much about your own character. And so that can right there help you to decide there's some things you want to work on or change when it comes to being part of your team. So thank you for that discussion. That was wonderful. Laura?
Next slide, please, Ava. So team building activities really go, like I said, I think I mentioned before, there's a whole continuum of what team building activities can be. They can be really simple, like just asking a question in a meeting and, you know, everyone having the time to answer the question in the way that they want to. Or it can be complex, such as scheduling a retreat for team building, taking time away from the office, and really focusing on activities that can help your team learn more about each other and trust each other. Next slide, please. So there are 4 types of team building activities. I just want to tell you, just based on just these bullet points here, if you did a search for team building activities on the internet, there are tons of resources, and I'm sure the quality of the activities varies, but there are all kinds of resources out there. If you were like, oh, I think I want to do a flexibility and planning activity at our next meeting, what are ideas for that, you know? So there are lots and lots of resources out there. So communication is really one of the cornerstones of the foundation of team building. Effective communication between the team, and, you know, kind of like what Rebecca was just talking about how you learn about yourself as part of a team, is that for me especially, I find out how effective I'm being when I communicate, when my staff reflects back to me what I said, and I learn about, maybe I you know, like Rebecca mentioned earlier, it's clear in my head, but that doesn't mean it's clear to other people who are listening. So some of the activities can include providing useful feedback. It can be conflict resolution, and also some of the other things can be around providing information in a timely way, in a clear way, and then also providing just opportunities for the exchange of information. So activities can, for communication, can be about that. Problem solving and decision making activities can help a team learn and practice making decisions, and to also look at the consequences or effects of particular decisions that the team makes together. And then coming back after something has been decided and then analyzing what happened and then moving forward from there. Flexibility and planning activities in terms of a TVR program. They can be creating time to perhaps look at the grant goals and objectives and activities, strategizing how those would be done, and then coming back together. Like I said before about the problem solving one, is seeing how things are going and then modifying and to continue on. And then trust building activities include different things like, you know, falling backwards and having one catch you. And isn't there like ropes course where you have to like try to hang onto a rope and not fall to the ground? I don't know what is in that, but so those are also activities where you learn more about each other and learn about how to support each other as best you can and work as a team.
I remember one time when I was directing the TVR program in New Mexico, we went away for a team building activity into the mountains, and they had a number of trust building activities. And I think that was probably the most challenging thing that really any of us had ever done, because it required getting to the point of touching each other. And I don't mean, you know, I don't mean that we did that the whole time, but there was an activity where we had to intermingle and hold each other's hands and then figure out how to get out of that without disconnecting our hands. And you were in very close proximity with each other and holding hands. And I remember thinking, wow, this is a whole different level of trust than when I say to staff, hey, can you provide me with that document? And I trust that they're going to do that. And so it really took, it took the team to kind of a new level in terms of trusting by being able to do that. So powerful in each category. Let's see if we have anything in the chat. Keith said, that's nice. I think he was referring to what Susie was talking about. So I want to move to a discussion question. And again, we really value your input as we go through these discussion questions. They help all of us to learn from each other. And this one is, have you ever done any culturally sensitive or culturally appropriate team building with your staff? And if you have, please explain. Now, we heard a simplified example from, I think it was Susie, who said that, you know, they sit down and they do some beating sometimes just to be able to come together as a group and de-stress. So what are some things that maybe you have done as a staff that are culturally sensitive or culturally appropriate team building?
Tammy in the chat says, yes, native arts and craft and storyteller. I know that Tammy is a storyteller. Keith said, your fears, concerns, etc., without using them as tools against each other. And Rachel said, as a tribe, different departments switch off on hosting a potluck.
Oh, that's great. Keep sharing. This really helps us to understand culturally what's appropriate in different communities and things that we could think about doing. Well, let's put up a poll. And Sarah said traditional clothing day once per month at the office. That's great. And Amanda said we have events quarterly, painted pottery this quarter and went to Hot Springs in September. We may sew next time or go to a movie from 1 to. That's great. Those are great examples and really pertinent to your staff. Angie said learning about the region's historical trauma and what traditional healing knowledge can be recommended. That's great because there are effects of that everywhere. And Rachel said, then there are a few activities per year where we prepare and decorate together, like for the Indian Expo Parade, but I want to do some just as our own department too. We have several new team members. That's one thing I really want to accentuate or to focus on is when you have a newer team or new people coming into your team, it's especially important to do some things that provide that unity, create that unity. And so thank you for sharing that, Rachel. And then Sheila said we wear our ribbon shirts on Thursdays. That's awesome. And see, that's we look at that and we don't necessarily think of that as team building, but it is. You're coming together as a group, doing something all together that focus on culture. So thank you for sharing that. Ava, if you want to put that poll up on culturally appropriate activities, that would be great. So this says, do you know examples of culturally appropriate team building? If you would respond to this, we would really appreciate it. You guys are so helpful when you respond to these. It really helps us to know in terms of what we need to focus on when we're doing certain presentations. So thank you for doing that. So I love that most of you know some examples of culturally appropriate team building. Some of you said, no, you don't, and others said somewhat. So as we continue, I hope that you'll learn some things about some examples of culturally sensitive team building with staff. So anything in the chat we need to?
Shalene said, I had a new staff member sit in with me this morning in a meeting, and I learned 2 things about them today, their communication style and their method of working. And Sarah Lizak said, traditional foods potluck quarterly.
That is great.
Okay, Shalene, I think that's a great example.
Yeah, so Shalene, no problem at all. First of all, you know, you are just taking some time to learn about someone, which is going to create that unity. And so we appreciate that example. And I love all the different types of things that really focus on culture. So let's talk a little bit more about culturally appropriate sensitive team building and giving you some examples in each of those categories that Laura talked about. So first of all, the communication activity. Laura talked about this can be as simple as just asking a question at a staff meeting. And that question can look something like, do you participate in a cultural activity or event that provides comfort and inspiration for you? And you would have those from the community share about that. And then if you have someone who is not Native, you would ask, is there something in your culture that provides this for you? Please explain. So you want to hear what are the beliefs, the values, the spiritual things, the inspiration that people bring to the table that you can build on as a staff. That problem solving and decision making activity could be something where you discuss how problems are viewed in your culture. Every Native culture views problems a little bit differently. And in fact, there's a lot of cultures that don't view them as problems. They view them as challenges ways to be able to overcome. And so you could have a discussion about that, and then you could work together to create a cultural drawing that really represents that view from your community. And it could be a logo, it could be a piece of artwork, could be something you hang in your office that reminds you that there are ways to problem solve or challenges you can overcome as you work together. The flexibility and planning activity, you could have a discussion regarding how planning is carried out at your project, what things are important, what things are not important. As a group, you're going to be accomplishing goals and objectives. So how do you do that together? There is an activity, and we're happy to send that to you if you'd like to have that. Maybe some of you even know it. It's called a lifeboat activity. And it really is where you decide who really matters the most in your community. And I find it really fascinating to sit down and have a conversation with staff about if you were on a lifeboat and you could only have a certain number of people in that boat, and those are people from your community, who would you say to yourself has to be in that boat? So for some people, they're saying things like traditional healers, church officials, maybe the leaders in their community when it comes to their clans or their tribes. So it's interesting to see how people order the most important. Some actually start with the most vulnerable, the people with disabilities, the young people, and really having a conversation about how do we look at our provision of services when it comes to the priorities we have? How do we get on the same page when we look at priorities of those that we serve? So it's a really powerful activity. And then in the trust building activity, this can look like a lot of things. This could be participating in a sweat together. It could be going ice fishing. It could be dancing together for ceremonies in your community. You could even create vision boards to learn more about what matters to each staff member. It could be walking through your community and praying over the community. So this can look like a number of different things that you do together to build that trust.
Angie had a comment in the chat about culture also involves learning about marginalized communities, such as the deaf and hard of hearing, and reach out to this type of community and learning about their preferred method of communication, how to collaborate, sharing goals and objectives. Yes, continuously learning about self-improvement is part of cultural humility, stepping back and reflecting.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that.
And Amanda's comment is, we have historical photos throughout the office building, traditional murals painted in some lobbies, and when designing the hall and clinics, elders are on all the planning committees and youth. They also plan our annual convention on delegates and what is to be presented.
That's powerful, making sure that culture is infused in what you're doing. What other things can you think of? This may have created some thoughts or ideas. What are some things that you can think of that you might do with your own staff in terms of team building? Oh my goodness, Letty, you said something really powerful. Many youth have no cultural identity or knowledge. And so that is very true. And so I think that leads to the question, how might you as a TVR program begin to model that or show that for the youth in your community, especially the transition clients who are students with disabilities that you're working with? So thank you for sharing that. Anybody else want to unmute and share? I see Elise, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. I agree with Letty on that. Our youth are kind of, And I think it just goes to the parents too. So I feel like it's where we come in. But on our part, usually as staff at lunchtime, we'll sit and talk about what each village is doing. And I've learned that each village has their own process. And there's a little bit of a language difference there between, like, say, in Tuba City, Monkapee, which is like maybe 45 minutes from here. And then from here in Kikotsmobi, all the way from where I'm from. So it's the matter of trying to, find one unit to also share with our consumers. Some of our practices are different. So it's just like, well, we have to find that one thing where we all do and then try to go from there. But, we as staff, we share. So sometimes we can butt heads, but then, we're also learning from each other about what they do in their own villages.
That was great. It really lends itself to learning from each other to make sure that what you're doing resonates for all of you. So thank you, Elise, for sharing that. Anyone else want to unmute and share?
I was hoping Lee would have jumped in and helped me there.
Well, let me ask this final question before we get any comments or questions from each of you. And that has to do with what has been the most helpful in this presentation. As we've provided different components of team building, what do you feel like was the most helpful and beneficial for you?
Good afternoon. This is Keith.
Hi, Keith.
Hi. I just wanted to say that obviously it's always beneficial to get new perspectives or glean new information from listening to what my partners are doing all over the place, all over the map. Anytime we can kind of get some insight of someone else's perspective, it certainly helps us grow individually and helps us to grow in terms of our teamwork skills as well as our teamwork strategies. Sometimes something as simple as, taking time to play a game. I used to work for a facility where every so often the team would just kind of shut the office down and play bingo and eat lunch together, But again, the power is in the laughter. The power is in kind of creating some joy in the midst of the tension and the stress that comes with vocational rehabilitation, serving others. So I guess what I'm saying is it certainly doesn't have to be a mountain moving event to be effective. I think it's good to remember that, but again, just us being able to come together in this format, not necessarily being physically in contact with each other, but this is helpful as well. It's helpful to hear each other's voice, to be reminded that we're not the only ones struggling with whatever it is we're struggling with. And of course, to see all your shining faces, that's always a really big deal.
Thank you, Keith. I appreciate that comment. There's some really great wisdom in there as well.
There are
Laura,
several things in the chat box.
I was just going to ask you about that.
Carol said Wabano Teaching Lodge with, these are cultural team building activities. So Wabano Teaching Lodge with tribal elder cultural leader. Amanda said, hearing the different ways to team build in a cultural way, clothing, food, dancing, etc. Gail said the sharing of each other's activities. Tammy said the questions helps me realize that other programs are taking team building seriously and that having several activities that could potentially be used for team building. Said it addresses the need of how important self-care is to teams.
Very powerful. And again, we just want to emphasize that team building isn't that huge event. It isn't only that huge event where you go away for a weekend. Team building is anything that you do that brings your staff together to really focus on what each other needs and what the project needs to be able to accomplish those goals and objectives, and be able to be culturally sensitive and aware of what's going on in each other and the community. So thank you for sharing. That was really helpful and powerful. Laura, is there anything you want to add before we just go into, oh, Letty, I think has a response.
I think team building is very important because it will also motivate the staff, whether you're doing it as a group, individual, or like to sending out email to your staff, praising them of the good work that they've done and then what is expected on a positive side, maybe every Monday or every Friday too, as we're all leaving for the weekend, something positive, a positive email to your staff, you know, that will motivate your staff as well. Because with my prior job, we know that our program director used to do that. You know, every Monday she would come to work or she would send out an email, you know, like how many families rely on us in a positive way. And then every Friday, you know, she would tell us that, you know, we did a good job and to go home, hang up our coats and leave all our problems at work and go home and spend time and enjoy our family. I mean, that would be one of the ways to inspire team building too, on a positive side.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was great. I also just want to emphasize that if you are a new director, and again, even if you are a seasoned director who has new staff, it's really important to do some really focused team building to help bring everyone together and have that understanding of each other. So that's really important.